In the early 1980 seconds, the music world felt like it was waking up to something new every single day. On TV, in magazines, on big posters in cities, two names seemed to appear again and again: Michael Jackson and Madonna. They were not just singers. They were turning into symbols of a whole new kind of pop music. Teenagers copied their clothes, tried to dance like them, and argued with their friends about who was better. Adults who did not even listen to pop music still knew their names. It felt like the whole world was slowly choosing its heroes, and these two were at the front of the line. Michael Jackson had already been famous since childhood, but now he was something much bigger. His album Thriller did not just sell well. It broke almost every record people could measure. Radio stations played his songs again and again. His dance moves, like the moonwalk, made people stop and stare at the screen. His music videos were not simple performances anymore. They looked like short movies, with stories, costumes, and special effects that people had never seen in a music video before. Every new release from him felt like an event. Madonna, on the other hand, was the new storm arriving fast. She did not come from a long history of childhood fame. Instead, she pushed her way up from the busy clubs and small stages, where she danced, sang, and fought for every bit of attention. She wore clothes that were colorful, surprising, and very different from what people were used to. Her songs were catchy and easy to remember. Her voice had a confidence that told people she was not afraid of anyone's opinion. Step by step, she moved from unknown singer to rising star. Then, from rising star to full pop icon. Soon, newspapers and magazines started using labels. They called Michael Jackson the King of Pop, because his work set the level that others tried to reach. For Madonna, they started using phrases like Queen of Pop, because everywhere she went, trends followed. Fans loved these names. They made the two artists feel like characters in a giant story, a kind of modern royalty, ruling over charts and screens instead of castles and kingdoms. People compared them in everything. Who sold more records? Who had the biggest hit? Who wore the most interesting outfit? Who had the loudest fans? Inside the music industry, people watched them with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Record label leaders sat at long tables, looking at numbers and charts, trying to understand this new world. Some believed Michael Jackson showed the future of music: strong singing, perfect dancing, and big, high-quality productions that felt almost like Hollywood films. Others believed Madonna showed a different future: someone who could shape style, start trends, and change her image so quickly that fans never got bored. Quietly, in offices far from the stage lights, these people argued about one question: who truly held the key to the future of pop music? While fans and executives compared them, Michael and Madonna also knew about each other. How could they not? Their faces appeared on the same magazine covers, sometimes side by side. Their names were spoken together in award shows, list of nominees, and top 10 TV programs. Michael had seen how fast Madonna's name had exploded into the public eye. Madonna had watched how Michael's performances seemed to get more detailed and powerful with every tour and video. They were not close friends, but they were not strangers either. They were like two stars in the same night sky, each bright, each aware of the other's light. Michael, by nature, was often quiet in public settings. He cared deeply about his art and worried a lot about getting everything right. Behind the scenes, people saw how serious he was. In rehearsals, he could repeat the same move again and again until it matched the picture in his mind. He listened to music with a careful ear, searching for tiny details that most people did not even hear. Fame, for him, was not only about being known. It was about making something beautiful and powerful enough that it would last for years, maybe decades. Madonna's style was different. She talked freely, laughed loudly, and did not mind if her words shocked people a little. She used interviews and public moments like tools, turning every appearance into part of her story. If a camera was on, she understood that she was on stage. Even if she was just sitting in a chair, she understood that modern fame was not only built on albums, but also on images, headlines, and memorable statements. Where Michael often let his work speak first, Madonna knew how to make her voice part of the show. Their paths crossed at award ceremonies, charity events, and private parties where only a small number of famous people were invited. In these places, away from the crowd of fans, the atmosphere felt strange. On one side, there was music playing, people laughing, and glasses clinking. On the other side, there was a quiet tension, because everyone in the room knew how important these guests were. To watch Michael and Madonna move through such a party was like watching kings and queens walk through a crowded hall. People turned their heads, whispered to each other, and waited to see what would happen. Many of these meetings were short and polite. A hello, a smile, a few words about music or shows, then they moved on. But each small interaction added to the story that fans imagined. Reporters outside would ask, what did they say to each other? Are they friends? Are they rivals? Some stories were true, some were made up, but all of them added more color to the picture. The idea of a friendly competition between them made their careers even more exciting to watch. Back in the real world, far from the red carpets and bright lights, young people felt the effect of their fame in simple, personal ways. A teenager saving money to buy a cassette had to pick Michael's album or Madonna's. A girl standing in front of the mirror might try to curl her hair and layer bracelets like Madonna. A boy in his bedroom might study Michael's dance moves from a music video, rewinding again and again to copy the steps. These small moments repeated in millions of homes, shaping how an entire generation dressed, moved, and even dreamed. The 1,980 seconds were a time of change in music technology as well. New electronic sounds, new ways of recording, and the growth of music television all came together. Michael and Madonna both used these tools fully. Their videos filled the screens of MTV and other music channels, turning songs into visuals that people remembered for years. For many kids, their first idea of cool came from these screens. A sideways glance from Michael, a confident pose from Madonna, a dance line, a spin, a hand reaching toward the camera. Little by little, without any one person planning it, a pattern formed. If an artist wanted to be taken seriously in pop music, they had to think big. It was no longer enough to just record a good song. People expected a video, a look, a story, a performance that felt larger than life. Michael Jackson and Madonna did not just follow this trend, they drove it forward. They showed what was possible. And once people saw it, they could not go back to the old, simple way. By the middle of the decade, it felt clear to everyone in the industry that these two artists were not just part of the 80 seconds, they were helping to define it. Every new release was judged against their work. Every new performer was compared to them in some way. Is he the next Michael? Is she the next Madonna? The idea that there could be a king and a queen of pop culture gave fans an easy way to talk about something more complex: the changing shape of music, image, and fame itself. And behind all of this, behind the lights and sounds and magazine covers, something else was building. A quiet, powerful tension between two different ways of ruling pop music. One focused on perfect craft, the other on fearless reinvention. Both were strong. Both had millions of supporters. And sooner or later, these two worlds were going to collide in a much more personal way. The night felt almost unreal, like a dream made of soft lights and famous faces. It was one of those big music award evenings in the mid-1980 seconds, when the whole world seemed to be watching the same stage. The show was over now. The trophies had been handed out, and the loud crowd in the arena was going home. But not everyone was leaving. A small group of stars, producers, and powerful people were heading to a private after-party, hidden away from cameras and fans. Down a long hallway, past security and closed doors, there was a wide room filled with warm light. Gentle music played under the hum of voices. Glasses clinked softly. People laughed, some still wearing their stage clothes, others already changed into something more comfortable, but still stylish. In one corner, a group of reporters waited hopefully, but this room was mostly for insiders. Singers, managers, label heads, and a few carefully chosen guests. Michael Jackson arrived quietly, the way he often did. Even when he tried not to draw attention, people noticed him. He wore a sharp jacket that reflected the light just enough to look special, but not too bright. His hair was neat, his face calm. A few close friends and team members walked with him, forming a small cloud of safety around him. As he stepped into the room, conversations softened for a moment, then started again with new energy. People were used to seeing stars, but Michael felt different. He carried the weight of Thriller, of record-breaking sales, of history-making performances. Just his presence changed the mood. Not long after, Madonna entered from the other side of the room. She did not slip in quietly. She walked with quick, sure steps, as if she owned the floor. Her outfit was bold and playful, the kind that made people turn their heads just to study each detail. Bracelets, earrings, layers of fabric that looked both casual and carefully planned. She smiled easily, greeting people with short hugs and cheek kisses, laughing at something a friend whispered in her ear. A small group moved around her too, but her style felt more open, more direct. She looked like someone who loved being at the center of the action. Even before they saw each other, their presence formed two centers in the room. One group gently pulled toward Michael. Another gathered around Madonna. Some guests floated between both, carrying stories and impressions. The air was full of light gossip. Who had won? Who had been upset about losing? Whose performance had surprised everyone? And, of course, plenty of talk about Michael and Madonna. They had both performed. Both been shown on the screen again and again. Both mentioned in speeches. Everyone knew that having them in the same room made this party feel special. For a while, they simply existed on opposite sides of the space, each in their own small circle. Michael listened more than he spoke, nodding, laughing quietly, sometimes covering his smile with his hand the way he often did. When someone praised his performance, he thanked them in a soft voice and turned the attention back to the music itself or to his team. He always seemed more comfortable talking about the work than about himself. Madonna, meanwhile, was full of life. She described her performance with big gestures, told little behind-the-scenes stories, and teased her friends in a friendly way. People around her are drawn to her courage. She did not sound afraid of praise or judgment. When someone complimented her, she accepted it with a grin, sometimes adding a joke that made others laugh. Eventually, as usually happens in such rooms, the circles began to shift. Someone decided it would be fun, or maybe important, to bring the two stars closer. The host of the party, a well-known producer, moved across the room with a plan in his mind. First, he walked to Michael and spoke quietly to him. "Madonna's here," he said with a little smile. Michael shook his head. "Not yet," he answered. "I've been here. Talking." "You should," the producer suggested. "You two are ruling this whole decade." This. Michael gave a small, shy laugh at that. But he agreed. At the same time, the producer made a similar visit to Madonna. "Michael's over there," he told her, pointing with his chin. "You two together in one corner? That's history." Madonna's eyes lit up with interest. "Then, let's make some history." she replied, half joking but also serious. She had met Michael before in passing, but it still felt like an event every time. He was a quiet person, different from her, and that made their interactions more interesting. So, slowly, step by step, the space between them decreased. A few people moved aside, sensing that something worth watching was about to happen. In a moment, they were standing only a few feet apart. The producer, now acting like a master of ceremonies, clapped his hands once in a light, playful way. "Michael," he said. Madonna wanted to say hello. Madonna, Michael. They already knew each other, of course. But the introduction gave everyone an excuse to focus on the moment. Michael smiled, his eyes warm, and extended his hand. "Hi," he said softly. "You were great tonight." Madonna shook his hand firmly. "You too," she replied. "You always are." For a few minutes, the talk stayed light and casual. They spoke about the show, the stage, how bright the lights had been, how fast rehearsals had gone. Other people added small comments, laughed, told tiny stories. It could have stayed that way, just a polite, forgettable conversation between two famous people. But Madonna's mind did not work that way. She had a sense for moments that could be bigger, more memorable. She liked to say things that stayed in people's heads. And this, with so many important eyes on them, felt like such a moment. There was a short pause in the conversation, a natural little silence. Music from the speakers filled the gap, and a waiter passed by with a tray of drinks. Madonna took a glass, turned back to Michael, and tilted her head slightly as she looked at him. Her eyes were playful, but there was something sharp in them too. "You know?" Her voice clear enough for the small group around them to hear. The words hung in the air like a bright neon sign. A few people who were talking quietly nearby fell silent without even meaning to. Some did not know whether to laugh or pretend they had not heard. It was the kind of line that could be taken as a joke, or as a challenge, or as both at the same time. Madonna's face carried a teasing smile, but she did not look away. She knew exactly what she had said. She loved testing boundaries, and this sentence was a test. Was it true? Was it false? Maybe it did not matter. What mattered was the reaction, the energy it created. Inside, different thoughts raced through Michael's mind. He had spent his life working, practicing, making music that touched millions of people. He was used to breaking records, hearing crowds chant his name, seeing his face on posters across the world. The idea of someone telling him they were more famous could easily hurt his pride. But he had also learned, from years of attention, that not every comment deserved a fight. He looked at Madonna for a moment. Really looked, as if he were seeing not just her, but the version of herself she presented to the world. She was bold, quick, clever. She used words like tools. He understood that a direct argument here would not only spoil the mood, but also turn the moment into a story that would be retold in ways he could not control. So instead of frowning or answering back with harsh words, he smiled. It was a small smile, but it reached his eyes. He lowered his head just a little, as if he were letting the comment pass over him like a soft wave. "Maybe," he said quietly, his tone gentle and light. "You are everywhere." There was kindness in his voice, but something else too, something unreadable. It was as if he were giving her the point in this small game, while also stepping out of the game completely. People around them let out a breath they had not realized they were holding. Some laughed. A few repeated Michael's words, enjoying the clever way he had handled the situation. Madonna's smile widened. She had expected surprise, maybe a joke back, maybe even a serious answer. What she got instead was something more difficult to read. A peaceful acceptance on the surface, with a mystery underneath. It was not a surrender. It was a choice not to fight with words. The producer clapped his hands softly again, breaking the tension. "Well," he said in a joking tone. "If you ask me, the world is big enough for both of you." People laughed, and the sound rolled through the room. Someone asked Madonna about her next video. Someone else asked Michael about his upcoming tour. The conversation broke into smaller pieces again, and the group slowly spread out. But the moment was not gone. It stayed in the minds of the people who had heard it. Madonna's bold line. Michael's quiet answer. If fame had a face, it had just looked at itself from two sides. Later that night, as the party went on, whispers moved from one corner to another. Did you hear what she said to him? What did he say back? How did he take it? Some told the story with extra details that were never there. Some changed the words a little to make them sound bigger. That is what happens with stories, especially when they involve very famous people. But at the center of all those versions was a truth. In a private room, after a glittering award show, Madonna had told Michael Jackson, "I'm more famous than you," and his reaction had been calm, careful, and surprisingly gentle. On the outside, the night went on like any other party. People danced, talked, and made plans. But inside Michael's heart, something had shifted. He did not show it on his face, not in that moment. He kept his smile, kept his polite behavior. Yet the words stayed with him, turning slowly into something else. Something that would not be answered with talk, but with music, dance, and ideas that would change what pop could be in the years to come. When Michael left the party that night, the city lights outside the hotel looked different to him. They were the same street lamps, the same glowing signs, but his mind kept replaying one single moment. In the back seat of the car, as it moved slowly through the traffic, he leaned his head against the window and watched the lights slide past like slow stars. Madonna's voice echoed again in his memory. "I'm more famous than you now, right?" It was just one line, said with a smile, but it stayed with him like a question that refused to fade. His team talked quietly in the car about the show, the awards, the performances. Someone mentioned the after-party. Someone else told a short joke. Michael nodded politely when people spoke to him, but his thoughts were far away. He was not angry. It was something more complicated than that. Fame, he knew, was not a simple thing you could measure like height or weight. It shifted with time, with trends, with headlines. Still, there was a truth hidden inside the remark that touched a sensitive place in his heart. When he reached home, the house was calm and quiet. The noise of the party felt far behind him now, as if it belonged to another world. He changed into comfortable clothes, walked through his large living room, and finally stopped near a shelf where his awards were neatly placed. Golden and silver shapes caught the light as he passed. He studied them for a moment, not with pride, but with a kind of gentle distance. These were symbols, reminders of his work and of the love people had given him. But they were not the final answer to the question in his mind. Instead of going straight to bed, he went to his music room. This was the place where he felt most like himself. Instruments, tapes, notebooks, and microphones surrounded him. There was a piano in the corner, a drum machine on a table, and speakers ready to play any sound he wanted. He sat down and let his fingers move lightly over the keys of the piano, searching for a melody without really trying. A soft tune formed, almost like a whisper. As he played, his breathing slowed, and his thoughts began to settle. He thought about fame as a kind of light. Sometimes it shone on you brightly, and sometimes it moved away to shine on someone else. He knew that every artist had their moment. Some moments were long, some short. He had already enjoyed a moment so bright it had changed music history. But he also knew that the world did not stop. New artists came, new sounds appeared, and the public's attention moved like a restless river. Maybe Madonna was right that night. Maybe, in that particular moment, she was on more magazine covers, in more headlines, in more people's daily conversations. Instead of letting the thought make him sad, he asked himself a different question. What can I do with this feeling? He had learned, from his earliest days on stage, that emotions could be turned into art. Joy, sadness, loneliness, excitement, even doubt, if he poured them into his music and his dance, they could become something beautiful, something that spoke to others. Sitting at the piano, he realized that her words were not only a challenge to his pride, but an invitation to grow again. In the days that followed, his schedule was full, as always. There were meetings with producers, calls with his label, talks about the next album, plans for future videos. But those ordinary tasks now carried a new energy. When someone asked, "Do you want to take a break before we start?" he shook his head and said, "No. Let's begin now." When a choreographer showed him a new step, he did not settle after getting it right once or twice. He repeated it again and again until it felt not just correct, but special. People around him started to notice. One of his close assistants whispered to another, "He's working even harder than usual." The other replied, "I didn't think harder than usual was even possible for him." In rehearsals, he arrived early and left late. In the studio, he listened to tracks with deep attention, asking for tiny changes in the rhythm, the harmony, the background vocals. He wanted every sound to carry a feeling, every line to mean something. But his response was not only about doing more, it was about doing better. He began to think not just as a singer or dancer, but as a full creator of experiences. He asked himself, what will make people remember this moment 10 years from now? 20? He did not want to simply chase numbers or records. He wanted to create something that would live in people's memories long after charts and magazine covers were forgotten. At the same time, he did something that might surprise those who did not know him well. He paid attention to Madonna's work with respect. He watched her new videos, not to copy them, but to understand what made them powerful. He noticed how she used fashion, how she played with different looks and identities. He saw how brave she was in front of the camera, how she turned every appearance into a story about her. He thought, there is something to learn here. Not about being her, but about being even more fully myself. In quiet moments, he talked with his creative team about the future. They sat around tables covered with photos, sketches, and notes. One person suggested a simple, safe concept for a new video. Michael listened politely, then shook his head. "It's good," he said, "but it's not unforgettable. I want people to see it and feel like they're seeing something new, something they've never seen before." He began to push for bigger ideas, short films instead of just videos, strong themes instead of simple performances. His reaction to that one sentence at the party was not loud or public. He did not call a press conference or give a long interview about it. He did not make a speech defending his status. Instead, he let his work become the answer. Every time he stepped into the studio or onto a rehearsal floor, he carried that small spark with him. It turned into extra focus, extra patience, extra effort in each detail. Some nights, when everyone else had gone home, he stayed alone in the rehearsal space. The large mirrors reflected his movements as he practiced. He would play one of his tracks and test new steps, new spins, new ways to move his hands or tilt his head. He watched himself carefully, asking, "Does this feel true? Does this feel like me?" The wooden floor felt familiar under his shoes, and the empty room became his quiet partner in creation. There were moments of tiredness, of course. There were days when his body ached and his voice felt worn. On those days, it would have been easy to slow down. But he remembered the feeling of standing in that party room, of hearing the words, "I'm more famous than you now." Right? And he decided that he would not answer by comparing numbers or fans. He would answer by growing, by becoming even better at what he was born to do. His collaborators, from musicians to video directors, began to feel pulled into this new level of intensity. A songwriter who brought him a draft of a song watched as Michael read the lyrics quietly, his eyes moving slowly over each line. "It's good," Michael said, "but I want something that really tells a story. Something people can feel in their hearts. Can we make this bridge stronger? Can we make the message clearer?" Instead of being upset, the songwriter felt inspired. It was tiring to work at this level, but it was also exciting. They were building something special. In private, Michael sometimes thought about Madonna again, not with anger, but with curiosity. He wondered if she ever felt the same pressure he did, the same weight of expectations. He understood that she too had to keep reinventing herself, keep surprising the audience. Fame had placed them on two high towers, and everyone was watching to see what they would do next. In a way, they were climbing different sides of the same mountain. He also understood something important. He did not have to be more or less than anyone. The real question was simpler and deeper. Am I being the best version of myself? That idea filled him with a calm kind of strength. If he followed his own truth in his art, if he gave everything he had to each song and each performance, then the changing waves of fame would matter less. What would remain was the work itself, the music, the dance, and the way people felt when they experienced it. Weeks turned into months. Ideas that had started as small sketches on paper grew into full projects, an album with a strong theme, videos that looked like small movies, tours that felt like complete worlds of sound and motion. People who had been at that party and heard Madonna's remark did not know it, but they were watching the quiet result of that moment unfold in front of them. By the time he stepped onto a stage again in front of thousands of fans, the remark had stopped hurting and had become something else. A hidden push that had helped him climb higher. As the lights rose and the music started, he looked out over the sea of faces, each one waiting, hoping, excited. In that instant, he understood that true fame was not a line in a conversation or a headline in a magazine. It was this connection, this shared moment, this feeling of being fully alive in his art. He moved, he sang, he danced with everything he had. The audience shouted his name, not because of what anyone had said at a private party, but because of what they felt right there, in that space, in that song. And though no one else could hear it, a quiet thought passed through his mind, gentle and steady. This is my answer. Nay of these stars appeared. Viewers waited for each premiere like a big event. When a new Michael Jackson video was announced, fans circled the date on their calendars. Families gathered in their living rooms to watch together. When a new Madonna video arrived, young people rushed to the screen, ready to see what new style or idea she would share. Even people who were not fans could not escape the excitement. The shows were replayed, discussed at school, talked about at work, and indirectly reached almost everyone. Other artists watched closely. Some felt nervous. How could they keep up with such huge ideas and attention? Others felt inspired. They thought, if the world is changing, maybe I can change too. Singers, who had once focused only on their voices, began to take dance classes. Bands who had never cared about fashion started to think about matching outfits, hair, and colors. A new kind of pop star was being created. One who had to care about sound, sight, movement, and message all at once. In a meeting room at a record label, a group of executives sat around a big table, looking at charts that showed sales, video popularity, and tour numbers. One of them tapped the table with a pen. "Look at this," he said. "Every time Michael or Madonna releases something, the numbers jump not only for them, but for the whole channel, the whole week." Another executive nodded. "They are not just artists," she said. "They are events. People plan their days around them." A third person added, "We need to think bigger. Every new album from our top acts should feel like an event too. Videos, special performances, new styles. The public now expects that. Decisions made in those rooms slowly changed the lives of many people. Dancers got more work, because live shows needed more movement. Designers found new chances, because stars wanted fresh outfits for each appearance. Directors began to dream about longer, more complex videos, knowing that labels would now support them. Meanwhile, Michael kept pushing himself in quiet, careful ways. In the studio, if a song felt even slightly ordinary, he did not throw it away. He asked how it could become unique. Maybe the rhythm could change, maybe the background voices could form a new pattern, maybe the lyrics could be sharpened to say something clearer. He trusted his instincts. When he felt a little shiver of excitement at a certain sound or line, he knew he was on the right path. He also started thinking more about themes, about what his music could say about the world beyond entertainment. He wanted songs that spoke about care, hope, and understanding, along with songs that made people want to dance. This balance made his work feel deep and wide at the same time. A listener could enjoy the beat, but also feel something important in the words. Madonna, on her side, was also growing. She had always been brave, but now she became even more thoughtful about how her songs and videos connected to real life. She looked at the world around her and asked, "What are people feeling? What are they worried about? What are they reaching for?" Sometimes her songs carried messages about self-respect, about freedom, about not letting others decide your worth. This gave her work an extra layer. It was not only catchy, it also touched hidden feelings in the hearts of many listeners. Even though they did not talk often, both Michael and Madonna felt the presence of the other like a steady wind at their backs. If Michael saw a headline praising Madonna's latest performance, he did not feel anger. He felt a gentle push to keep improving. If Madonna heard news about Michael's new record or grand tour, it did not discourage her. It reminded her to stay sharp and creative. They were separate, but linked, like two different lights brightening the same sky in different colors. The press noticed this and loved it. Articles appeared with titles that compared them. Who rules the charts? King and Queen of Pop. Who leads? Our television hosts asked guests, "Are you more of a Michael person or a Madonna person?" These questions fueled friendly debates everywhere. In school halls, one teenager might say, "Michael's dance moves are unmatched," while another replied, "Yes, but Madonna changes everything every year." People pick sides, but often, secretly, they listen to both. In homes around the world, the effect grew. A girl in one country glued pictures of Madonna from magazines onto her notebook, copying her layered jewelry and strong expressions. A boy in another country practiced Michael's spins in front of a mirror until he finally got one full turn without losing balance. A group of friends in another city tried to learn full routines from the videos, stopping and starting the tape again and again. These quiet moments showed how deeply the new pop style had entered everyday life. As the decade moved forward, the sound of the 1,980 seconds grew richer and more urgent. Keyboards, drum machines, and bright guitar lines filled the airwaves. But now, people did not only hear the music, they pictured entire scenes with it. They thought of Michael leaning forward with one hand on his hat, or Madonna striking a confident pose on a busy street set. The line between music and image had almost disappeared. A song was no longer just something you heard, it was something you saw and felt. Behind the scenes, many people remembered that night in the private party, where Madonna had spoken that daring line and Michael had answered with calm. They did not talk about it in public, but in quiet corners, they sometimes smiled and said to each other, "Strange how one small moment can push everything forward." They understood now that the true reaction had never been in that room. The real reaction had been taking shape across years of work, on stages, on screens, and in studios. Michael's gentle decision to turn a sharp comment into creative energy, and Madonna's bold choice to keep reaching higher, had together helped lift the ceiling for everyone. By the late 1980 seconds, the music world was louder, brighter, and more ambitious than anyone had imagined at the start of the decade. The stage designs were bigger, the choreography more complex, the stories and videos more thoughtful. New artists arrived into a world that Michael and Madonna had helped redesign, often without even knowing the full history of how it had happened. They only knew that this was what pop music looked like now. Grand, visual, full of feeling. Somewhere inside all of this, the spirit of that quiet challenge still lived. It was not about who was more famous anymore. It had grown into something better and more lasting. A shared drive to create at the highest level possible. And every time a young performer stepped onto a stage, hoping to give the audience a moment they would never forget, a small part of that story continued. Years passed, but that small moment at the party did not disappear. It became like a secret note written in the corner of a big painting. Most people looking at the picture never noticed it. But for the few who knew it was there, it quietly changed how they saw everything. The 1,980 seconds slowly turned into the 1,990 seconds. Fashions changed, new singers appeared, music styles moved in new directions. But the work Michael and Madonna had done during that bright decade stayed alive in people's minds, like a song that would not stop echoing. In different homes around the world, shelves held old cassette tapes and vinyl records with worn covers. Some had Michael's face on them, some had Madonna's. A teenager who had once danced in their bedroom to those songs grew up, started a job, created a family. Yet, when one of those old tracks came on the radio or played unexpectedly in a store, that now-grown person would suddenly feel like a child again. Their body would remember the old steps. Their mind would remember the feeling of seeing those first big music videos. The magic of those years had settled deep into people's hearts. Music, television, which had once been a new, uncertain idea, now followed the pattern that Michael and Madonna had helped to build. Channels around the world filled their days with videos from all kinds of artists. Some had the smooth, sharp dancing that reminded people of Michael's careful movement. Others had the brave and changing style that reminded them of Madonna's bold choices. Directors, choreographers, and designers who had started their careers working on projects for those two stars now brought their experience to new performers, passing along the high standards they had learned. In interviews, up-and-coming artists often mentioned them. One young singer might say, "I watched Michael Jackson's concerts again and again to understand how to hold an audience." Another might say, "Madonna showed me that I can change and grow and still stay true to myself." Even if they never met their heroes in person, they felt guided by them. Their music, their videos, and their stories became a kind of textbook for modern pop success. The friendly question of, "Who is more famous?" slowly changed into a different question. How did they change everything? Fans wrote about it in letters and early online posts. Some listed numbers: album sales, video views, ticket counts. Others focused on memories. The first time they saw Michael glide across the stage. The first time they saw Madonna appear in a surprising new look. It became clear that fame was only one part of the story. Influence was another, deeper part, the quiet way someone's work shapes the choices of others for years to come. From time to time, reporters who had been in the music world since the 1,980 seconds told small stories in magazines or documentaries. They spoke about late-night meetings, early rehearsals, sudden last-minute changes before big shows. Some of them also remembered that night at the party, when Madonna had made her bold comment and Michael had answered with a soft smile. They explained how, at that moment, many people in the room had felt a mix of surprise, amusement, and tension. No one had guessed how important that tiny exchange would become. In one such interview, a producer who had been standing nearby said, "I think that moment pushed both of them." in different ways. Madonna liked to test people with her words. Michael liked to answer through his work. Together, without planning it, they raised the level for everyone. They made the 80 seconds feel bigger. On another level, the 80 seconds had become a symbol of something special. A time when music, images, and dreams blended into one shining wave. People who had not even been alive during those years discovered them later through old videos and stories. A child, sitting with their parent, might point at the screen and ask, "Who is that?" The parent, smiling softly with a mix of nostalgia and pride, would reply, "That's Michael Jackson." Or, "That's Madonna. When I was your age." They were changing everything. In classrooms, students writing about culture were given assignments to study the 1,980 seconds. Some chose to write about politics, others about technology, but many chose music. They found photos of concerts where thousands of small lights filled the air like stars. They watched videos where dance and story blended together. They saw a man in a sparkling jacket move with impossible grace, and a woman in layered clothes stand in a powerful pose, telling the world she would not be quiet or small. They realized that these images were not just performances. They were ideas about confidence, effort, and creativity. Michael, in his own life, continued to search for ways to grow as an artist. He carried with him the habits he had strengthened after that night. Deep focus, endless practice, and a desire to speak to people's hearts. He tried new sounds, worked with new collaborators, and continued to think of music as something that could unite people across languages and borders. His tours reached countries he had never visited before. In each place, faces of all ages and backgrounds looked up at him, singing along with songs that seemed to belong to everyone. Madonna, too, moved forward with the same spirit of reinvention that had helped her climb in the 1,980 seconds. She changed her style again and again, releasing new songs with new moods and messages. Sometimes people were surprised, sometimes confused, sometimes delighted, but they were rarely bored. She believed that standing still was not an option for her. Each new era of her work felt like a new chapter in a long story, one that many people were eager to follow. From the outside, their paths might have looked very different, like two roads going in separate directions. But if someone could rise high above and look down at the larger picture, they would see that both roads were part of the same landscape. Each twist and turn changed the way the ground itself looked. The music industry, once simple and smaller, now seemed wide and rich, filled with color and movement. As time went on, other stars shone brightly too. New groups, new solo artists, new styles of music came and went. Some burned fast and disappeared quickly. Others lasted longer. But when people made lists of the most important figures in pop history, Michael and Madonna's names never left the top. They were like tall, steady trees in a changing forest. Even as new growth appeared around them, their roots stayed deep and their branches wide. In quiet moments, some of the people who had worked closely with both of them sat alone and thought back over the years. A dancer who had first learned harsh but rewarding routines for Michael's videos later taught classes to young students, passing on not only the steps, but also the lesson of discipline he had learned from Michael's example. A stylist who had helped create some of Madonna's unforgettable looks later designed clothes for new artists, encouraging them to be brave and original, just as Madonna had been. One evening, that same stylist spoke to a young singer who was nervous about trying a new, unusual outfit. "Are you sure?" the singer asked. "What if people think it's too strange?" The stylist smiled gently and replied, "Sometimes the thing that feels strange at first becomes the thing everyone remembers. I once worked with someone who understood that very well." The singer did not know, at that moment, that the someone was Madonna. But the lessons still reached their heart. Meanwhile, new technology changed the way people listened to and watched music. Tapes turned into discs, Discs turned into digital files, screens became smaller and then larger again. But no matter how the format changed, people continued to press play on the same classic songs, the same legendary videos. Online platforms filled with comments like, "I wasn't even born when this came out, but I love it," and "My parents showed me this, and now I show it to my friends." In this way, the influence of that playful yet sharp sentence and that calm, careful answer continued to move quietly through time. The question of who was more famous no longer mattered. What mattered was the chain of events that followed. Madonna's remark had sparked something in Michael, but his reaction had not been loud or cruel. It had been thoughtful. He had turned the moment into motivation, using it to uplift his art rather than drag someone else down. That choice had helped him reach new creative heights, and those heights had made other people want to climb higher too. Madonna, for her part, had not stopped being bold after that night. She kept challenging the world, and herself, with new ideas and strong statements. Her courage gave strength to many people who felt small or ignored. They saw in her an example of someone who refused to shrink, who believed in her own voice even when others doubted her. This spirit, too, spread through the years, shaping how people thought about confidence and self-expression. At some point, long after the party, long after the bright 80 seconds, Glow had become a warm memory. A music historian wrote a simple line in a book: "They did not just live in the 1,980 seconds, they helped define it." That line became a kind of summary of their shared story. It reminded readers that the decade was not just a set of dates on a calendar, but a time filled with choices, risks, and creative battles. Through their quiet rivalry, Michael and Madonna showed what could happen when two powerful talents pushed themselves instead of pushing each other down. Some nights, in different cities, tribute concerts played their songs. Young performers stood on stage, copying famous moves or outfits, but also adding their own ideas. The audience clapped, sang along, and felt connected to something older and bigger than any one event. Somewhere, in the soft space between memory and imagination, it was easy to picture a quiet room at a long-ago party, a smiling challenge, and a gentle answer. The 1,980 seconds music industry did not change in a single instant. But that small moment became one of the sparks. It showed that words and reactions, even in private places, could shape the future when they were turned into effort, art, and growth. In the end, Michael and Madonna were not remembered for who was more famous on one night. They were remembered for how they used their gifts, how they inspired others, and how their invisible conversation helped turn a decade into a legend that still lived on in every beat, every step, and every dream they helped create.